Genesis 18, verse 1, the son of promise. Then the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre, as he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. So he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men were standing by him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them, and bowed himself to the ground, and said, My Lord, if I have now found favor in your sight, do not pass on by your servant. Please let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. And I will bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh your hearts. After that you may pass by, inasmuch as you have come to your servant. They said, Do as you have said. So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, Quickly, make ready 3 measures of fine meal, knead it and make cakes. And Abraham ran to the herd, took a tender and good calf, gave it to a young man, and he hastened to prepare it. So he took butter and milk, and the calf which he had prepared, and set it before them. And he stood by them under the tree as they ate. Then they said to him, Where is Sarah, your wife? So he said, Here in the tent. And he said, I will certainly return to you according to the time of life, and behold, Sarah your wife shall have a son. Sarah was listening in the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, well advanced in age, and Sarah had passed the age of childbearing. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, After I have grown old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? And the Lord said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh, saying, Shall I surely bear a child, since I am old? Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. And he said, No, but you did laugh. Let's read commentary here, verses 1 through 15. Commentary is coming from the Tony Evans Bible Commentary. Forgive me. Okay, here we go. Verses 1 through 2 commentary. Soon after Abraham's covenant of circumcision, he was visited by what appeared to be 3 men standing near him. But the text makes it clear that it was actually the Lord and 2 angels, like Old Testament appearances of the angel of the Lord, or the commander of the Lord's army. See Joshua 5, verse 13 through 15, and Judges chapter 2, verse 1 through 5, and chapter 13, verse 1 to 23. This was a Christophany, a pre-incarnate but visible manifestation of the second person of the Trinity. Abraham did not realize at the time who these visitors were. Nevertheless, he hurried to show them hospitality. God decided to visit with Abraham personally, confirming what he had already promised many times. The picture here is a surprisingly intimate one. God sat and ate with Abraham for half a day, fellowshipping with him and surrounding his promise with his presence. In verse 9 through 12, every time God interacted with Abraham, he reminded him of the same promise. This time, though, the promise got more specific. I will certainly come back to you in about a year's time, God said, and your wife Sarah will have a son. Sarah, who had heard her ear to the tent door, overheard this audacious promise. She laughed to herself, scoffed at the silliness of the idea. Evidently, Abraham had failed to pass along the lesson he had just learned about the folly of laughing at God. God, of course, knew that Sarah was laughing, whether he heard it directly or not. In response, he asked the most important question of faith: Is anything impossible for the Lord? In other words, Sarah did you forget who you are dealing with here? Do you think it's hard for a God who made billions of stars from literally nothing to make an old lady a mother? Most of our faith problems go back to how we answer this question. We look at the facts and say, I must be too old, too weak, too messed up. God can't work in this situation, but God invites us to look past the facts and see his face, to let the facts be swallowed up in faith. Is anything impossible for the Lord? No. Okay, we're going to continue on reading scripture. Verse 16 of Genesis 18, Abraham intercedes for Sodom. Then the men rose from there and looked toward Sodom, and Abraham went with them to send them on the way. And the Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham what I am doing? Since Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have known him in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord, to do righteous and justice, that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him. And the Lord said, Because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grave, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry against it that has come to me, and if not, I will know. Then the men turned away from there and went toward Sodom. But Abraham still stood before the Lord. And Abraham came near and said, Would you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there were 50 righteous within the city. Would you also destroy the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous that were in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing as this, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous should be as the wicked. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? The Lord said, If I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. Then Abraham answered and said, Indeed, now I who am but dust and ashes have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose there were 5 less than the 50 righteous. Would you destroy all of the city for lack of 5? So he said, If I find 45, I will not destroy it. And he spoke to him yet again, and said, Suppose there should be 40 found there. So he said, I will not do it for the sake of 40. Then he said, Let not the Lord be angry, I will speak. Suppose 30 should be found there. So he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. And he said, Indeed, now I have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 should be found there. So he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. Then he said, Let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak but once more. Suppose 10 should be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. So the Lord went his way as soon as he had finished speaking with Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. Let's read commentary here, verse 16 through 33. So, verse 16 through 21, we read that God had just come to reinforce his promise to Abraham. He had come on a mission of judgment towards Sodom and Gomorrah, which he shared with Abraham as they prepared to leave. He would go down to see if what they have done justifies the judgment planned, which some interpreters think means that God actually needed on the ground intelligence. But as the fully omniscient God, of course, he already had all the information he needed. He just wanted to make it plain that the coming destruction was just. The presence of God and his angels and the way they were to be treated would further verify that the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah was immense, and that their sin was extremely serious. It consisted of gross immorality, violence, and oppression of the poor. See Ezekiel 16, verse 49 through 50. In verse 18 through 19, in the midst of this mess, God makes a beautiful statement about his vision for kingdom fathers, men who represent God. The ultimate father, kingdom fathers, are chosen. If you're a man and you're a Christian, God has selected and elected you for a reason. You have a world-altering destiny that God intends you to fulfill. A kingdom father also bears the responsibility to command his children and his house after him to keep the way of the Lord. Specifically, fathers are to teach and model before their children the dual responsibilities of righteousness, obedience to God's moral standards, and justice, the equitable and impartial application of God's moral law in society. God intends for men to lead their families. Our generation's fundamental problem is family broken, which has led to a generation of children with few men to follow. So our youth either follow fools or they follow themselves, which can turn out to be the same thing. God intends to use his men to represent him in the building of strong families and the raising of kingdom kids. That may be a weighty responsibility, but it's also a thrilling opportunity. Don't let it pass you by. It would be in fulfilling his family responsibility that Abraham would see God's national promises fulfilled. This again highlights the crucial role that family plays in expanding God's kingdom agenda and building a stable society. With verses 22 to 26, with the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah imminent, God paused yet again to allow them another chance. This time, Abraham would be a part of the forbearing process. Abraham appealed to God's justice by saying, "Will you really sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" What follows is a peculiar scene that sounds akin to the kind of haggling you would hear in a fruit market. Abraham was attempting to talk God down, and surprisingly enough, God played along. "Will you sweep away the righteous? If there are 50 righteous people in the city," Abraham asked. God responded, "If I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake." In verse 27 through 33, the negotiation continued for 45, for 40, 30, 20, and even just 10. Each time God responded to Abraham's compassionate intercession by granting him his request. God was not only allowing, but it was also encouraging Abraham to keep asking for more. This entire scene corresponds with what we read in Matthew 5, verse 13 through 16, where Jesus talks of believers as the salt of the earth and light of the world. Our job as members of God's kingdom is to act as a preserving influence in a dark and dying world. Note that God would have spared the entire city if there had been just 10 believers there. Righteous people, even a small minority of them, can promote righteousness in such a way that the entire society benefits. That concludes Genesis 18. Stay tuned for Genesis 19.